There is a place in the wilderness where no map dares to name it, a place where the earth once opened its mouth and swallowed pride whole. This is not the story of a war. It is not the tale of swords or thrones or kings. It is the story of a man named Korah, a Levite, a cousin to Moses, a priest once chosen, who chose instead to rebel. Driven by ambition, cloaked in false holiness, Korah challenged the divine order set by God himself. With words of equality, he gathered the proud. With incense, he provoked the heavens. And in return, the ground trembled, the sky darkened, and judgment fell, not from above, but from below. This is the story of a buried city, forgotten by time but remembered by the wind, where the voices of the rebellious still echo beneath the dust, where pride built a kingdom that God buried in silence. For the ground may look still, but it listens. The wilderness stretched endlessly beneath a silent sky, an endless, breathless space between slavery and promise. And there, among the tents of the chosen people, pride began to rise like smoke from unseen fires. The people of Israel had grown accustomed to the voice of Moses, the man who climbed the mountain wrapped in thunder, the man who spoke with God as a man speaks with his friend. They had grown used to the priesthood of Aaron, the burning incense, the rituals, the laws, but among them stood one who no longer bowed. Korah, son of Izhar, a Levite of sacred duty, had once walked in reverence. He had helped carry the holy things, had stood at the edge of the most holy place. But in his heart, a seed of ambition had taken root, and it grew quickly in the soil of jealousy. He watched Moses, his cousin, and Aaron the high priest, eyes narrowing with silent disdain. "Who made them kings over us?" he muttered beneath his breath. "Does not the Lord dwell in all of Israel? Are we not all his holy ones?" Around him the discontented gathered, Dathan and Abiram, sons of Reuben, men of rebellious spirit, who had never forgotten Egypt nor forgiven the desert. Together they whispered their defiance in the dark, and soon 250 men of name and power joined them, leaders, princes, influencers. It was not a riot. It was a movement. They built their own gathering of tents, a city within the camp where Korah reigned in spirit, if not in title. They spoke of equality, of shared holiness, of a God who had no favorites. But beneath their polished words and noble speeches, pride coiled like a serpent, waiting to strike. One night, as the stars burned cold and the tabernacle flickered in the distance, Korah stood before the people and lifted his voice. "You take too much upon yourselves, Moses and Aaron. The whole congregation is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, some drew back. Moses, hearing these words, fell upon his face in silence. Not in fear, but in sorrow. He had seen rebellion before, golden calves, murmuring lips, and the fire of divine wrath. But this was different. This came not from strangers or outsiders. This came from the heart of the priesthood itself. And the earth itself seemed to respond. That night, the ground trembled beneath the tents of Korah. A wind swept through the camp, and those who listened closely could hear it, a distant rumble, as though the soil remembered something buried long ago. Morning came, but the sun did not rise gently. It rose like a judgment over the wilderness, casting harsh light upon the tents of Israel. Whispers had turned to open talk. The camp murmured like a stirred hive, and all eyes were now drawn to the place where Korah's city stood, tents of pride erected within the tents of God. Moses stood before the people, his face etched by years of prophecy, flame, and desert wind. He spoke with a voice not of fear, but of fire and grief. "By this you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works. and that it has not been of my own will." He looked upon Korah, who stood defiant, arms folded, lips curled in quiet triumph. By his side were Dathan and Abiram, silent, brooding men whose rebellion burned not in words, but in hatred long buried. Moses turned to the congregation. "Take your censers," he said, "you and all your company. Place fire in them. Offer incense before the Lord tomorrow, and let him who is holy be made known." That night, the camp held its breath. The men of Korah, 250, each with their own censer of bronze, polished their instruments. They wore fine garments, braided cords, symbols of their tribes. Their eyes held no fear. They believed they were the chosen. They believed God would speak in their favor. But Moses, returning to his tent, fell to his knees. "O Lord," he whispered, "do not respect their offering. They have rejected you, not me." The next morning, as the sun rose red over the horizon, the 250 men gathered before the tent of meeting. Censers were lit. Smoke curled into the sky. The air filled with incense, not the fragrance of worship, but the bitter perfume of pride. Then the Lord spoke, not with gentle whisper, but with the thunder of anger. "Separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment." A shockwave of silence fell upon the camp. Moses cried out, interceding once again, "O God, the God of all spirits, shall one man sin and you be angry with all?" And God answered, "Then speak to the people. Tell them to flee the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram." So Moses ran, his voice a final plea, a final warning echoing across the sands. "Depart now from the tents of these wicked men. Touch nothing of theirs, lest you be swept away in their sin." Mothers gathered their children. Warriors backed away. Friends turned their eyes. The tents of rebellion stood alone, proud and tall, beneath a cloud that now began to form overhead, dark, unnatural, churning like a pot stirred by unseen hands. And still, Korah did not move. He stood at the center of his city of pride, incense rising from his hands, confident that heaven would favor him. But heaven was silent, and the earth began to groan. Though the sun remained, the sky dimmed like a curtain of judgment. A thick shadow rolled in from the east, slow and soundless. A storm came, not with wind or rain, but with a heavy, unseen weight. It loomed over the camp like a shroud, casting fear into the hearts of those who still lingered near the tents of Korah. The 250 men stood in a solemn line before the tent of meeting, their censers burning, their faces lit with a strange blend of confidence and pride. And then Moses stepped forward. He stood between the camp and the rebellious, his staff gripped tightly, his voice thunderous not with anger, but with the certainty of divine justice. "By this you shall know that the Lord has sent me," he proclaimed, "and that I have not done these things of my own will. If these men die a common death, or if they are visited by the fate of all men, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord creates a new thing, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them whole, then you shall know that these men have despised the Lord." The earth beneath their feet began to tremble. A low rumble echoed across the sands, not from above, but from beneath. And then it happened. The earth split. A jagged crack split the earth, starting beneath Korah and racing like lightning across the tents of defiance. The ground trembled like a beast awakening from its chains. Screams pierced the sky. With a thunderous roar, the chasm widened, tearing the rebellion from the land. Tents, livestock, supplies, entire households were pulled into the abyss. Dathan, Abiram, and the families of the proud were seen only for a breath, and then were gone. The dust rose. Silence followed. But it was not over. From above, fire fell. Fire from the presence of the Lord fell upon the 250 men offering incense. In a single breath they were consumed, their senses falling to the ground, glowing red-hot, untouched by human hands again. The people of Israel fled, crying aloud, "The earth has swallowed them, the fire has devoured them. Flee, lest it consumes us too." And stillness returned to the wilderness. Where once there had been a gathering of men, there was now only scorched earth and the faint echo of rebellion swallowed by judgment. No one spoke of Korah's city after that day. It felt as though creation itself had turned its face in grief. Where rebellion once stood, tents, voices, laughter, there remained only silence and emptiness. A ragged wound split the ground, still smouldering with heat, its edges blackened like the rim of an altar that had tasted sacrifice. The people watched from a distance, silent, breathless, terrified. No cries rose from the pit, no hands reached back to the surface. It was as though the earth had swallowed more than flesh and blood. It had swallowed memory, presence, legacy. And then the ground moved again. With a groan like the grinding of ancient gates, the chasm began to close. Dust rose in thick clouds as stones dragged across one another. Slowly the chasm sealed itself, deliberate, final, like the hand of God closing a book. No scar marked the earth. No trace betrayed what had happened. No marker, no tomb, no monument, only silence. And all who watched trembled. Moses fell to his knees. Aaron stood beside him, face pale, lips trembling, not in fear for himself, but in awe of the holiness they had witnessed. Not just power, but pure, perfect justice. Then the Lord spoke once more, not in wrath, but in command. Take up the censers of the men who sinned at the cost of their lives. Let them be hammered into a covering for the altar, a sign to the children of Israel, that no outsider shall come near to burn incense before me again. So Eleazar, son of Aaron, gathered the scorched bronze from the ashes. Each censer bore the scorch of a fire, not from the sky, but from the very heart of God's presence. They were beaten flat and laid upon the altar, a memorial of warning, a seal of fire. From that day on, no one questioned whom the Lord had chosen. And though the earth closed, the people said it was not truly shut. For when the wind howled across the wilderness, some claimed they heard it still, voices beneath the sand, crying out in rebellion, in regret, in eternal dissent. Sheol's gate, the elders whispered, the mouth of the deep was opened once, and it may open again. Years passed. Seasons rolled over the wilderness like shadows sweeping across ancient stone. The people of Israel marched on, carrying the tabernacle, following the pillar of cloud by day and the fire by night. Yet one place was never forgotten. It bore no name on their maps, no altar, no banner. But they remembered where the earth had opened her mouth and swallowed the proud. The elders called it Sheol's gate, a place avoided by shepherds, by travelers, by the curious and the brave. Not even birds would settle there. Even the wind seemed to whisper instead of howl. Children were warned, do not play near that place. The earth remembers what it swallowed, and it may hunger again. Mothers glanced toward it and held their infants closer. Warriors who once stood fearless before giants now walked faster when crossing its edge. And yet, there were whispers. Always whispers. Some said that when the wind shifted just right, muffled cries could be heard rising from beneath the dust. Not screams, not agony, but voices still arguing, like a council locked in eternal debate. At the center of the camp, the altar still stood, its bronze covering gleaming with the hammered metal of the destroyed censers. A silent reminder to all who approached it, come not with pride, come not uncalled. And somewhere deep below, sealed by the breath of God and the weight of judgment, lay a buried city, not made of stone, but of tents and ashes and pride. A city God buried, not just in the earth, but in history. One night, long after the generation had passed, a young prophet slept near the edge of the wilderness, and he dreamed. He saw a great chasm open once more, and from within it rose a shadowy city. The tents stood, but they shimmered with flame. The people wandered, still debating, still demanding, still blind to the judgment they had received. And a voice said to him, "This is what pride builds. This is what my justice buries." The prophet awoke, drenched in sweat and screaming. Thus ends the tale of the city that God buried beneath the earth. Let every generation remember. For the ground may look still, but it listens.